Welcome to our deep dive on the art of negotiation. We're going to be using Michael Wheeler's A Arte de Negociación as our guide today.
Yeah. It's interesting because most people, when they think about negotiation, they think of this battlefield.
Right, like all these hardcore tactics.
Exactly. But Wheeler kind of flips that idea on its head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he starts the book with this almost unbelievable story about soldiers lost in a blizzard in the Alps.
Okay.
They find a map and think, great, we're saved,
Hope.
right? But it turns out it's a map of the Pyrenees Mountains, not the Alps.
Oh, no. Talk about insult to injury, right?
Seriously. But here's the thing. The useless map actually saves their lives.
Wrist. How?
Well, for one, it gave them a purpose.
Okay. A direction to go in.
Exactly. They weren't just stuck anymore.
Right.
And as they traveled, they could kind of compare the landmarks they were seeing to the map, even though it was wrong.
Okay.
And from that, they could adjust their course.
So they were able to adapt.
Yeah. And Wheeler uses this story to illustrate a point that's super important for any negotiation.
What's that?
You have to be adaptable.
Okay. So we're not talking about like sticking to a rigid plan no matter what.
Right. It's about embracing the chaos.
Okay. So roll with the punches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In fact, Wheeler and some of his colleagues from Harvard, MIT, Tufts did some research on master negotiators.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they studied people like George Mitchell.
The guy who helped bring peace to Northern Ireland.
That's the one.
Those are some high-stakes negotiations.
You said it. And Bruce Wasserstein.
Okay, I don't know that one.
He's a legend in investment banking. But the main takeaway from their research was that these masters of negotiation, they didn't try to eliminate uncertainty.
Yeah.
They embraced it. There's this great quote from one negotiator who said, "You got to make chaos your friend."
I like that.
Right. So just like that wrong map helped the soldiers by giving them a starting point, even if it wasn't perfect.
Right.
We need that same flexibility in negotiations.
Okay, so being ready to adjust as things unfold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This also ties into Wheeler's idea of the zone of possible agreement, or ZOPA.
Zope.
Yeah. It's not just this I win, you lose kind of deal.
Right.
Think of it like a triangle, where each point is one side in the negotiation.
So instead of that straight line of win-lose, we've got this whole area where agreement might be possible.
Exactly. And the size and shape of that triangle, the ZOPA, it can change during the negotiation.
How so?
Well, as you get more information or priorities change.
Okay, I see.
Wheeler talks about this couple, Carol and Don, who were trying to find their dream home.
They probably had a pretty strict budget in mind, right?
Oh, yeah. But you know what? They ended up spending a bit more than they planned.
Why?
Well, because the perfect property turned out to be even better than they expected.
So their wants evolved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the lesson here, don't be afraid to let your wants change as you learn more in a negotiation.
That makes sense. I mean, sometimes what you think you want at the beginning isn't actually the best outcome once you've got all the facts.
Right. It's like this other example Wheeler gives about this guy, Jack, who was buying a used Volvo.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Right. But then he found out about this really low financing rate.
Okay.
And that changed everything.
Yeah.
Suddenly, he could afford to spend a bit more on the car itself.
So even in those seemingly simple deals, you gotta be ready for those hidden factors.
Yeah, they can pop up and change the whole game.
So it's not just about the initial price tag. There might be other things to consider.
Right. And that might even create value for both sides.
I like that.
Now, let's talk about your mindset going into a negotiation.
Okay.
Wheeler calls this presence of spirit.
Presence of spirit. Sounds kind of mystical.
Well, it's about striking a balance between three kind of contradictory qualities.
You okay?
You need to be calm and attentive, patient and proactive, practical and creative, all at the same time.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Right. But mastering this is what makes a good negotiator great.
So it's like being a Zen master who's also a chess grandmaster, staying cool under pressure, but also thinking several moves ahead. Uh-huh.
That's a great way to put it. Wheeler tells this story about Daniel Yin, who negotiated his brother's release from kidnappers.
Oh, wow. Talk about pressure.
Right. But he stayed so calm and collected, and he was always thinking steps ahead.
Like what?
Well, his first offer was actually lower than what the kidnappers were expecting.
Huh.
And he even emphasized the words, right now.
Okay.
It was like a hint that, future increases were possible.
So he wasn't just throwing out a number and hoping for the best.
No way. He was being super strategic with his words to keep the dialogue open.
So smart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he knew it was a long game.
Right.
His priority was buying time and making sure his brother was safe.
Wow.
He wasn't trying to end the negotiation immediately.
I see.
Daniel Yin really embodies that presence of spirit.
Yeah, he
He
does.
was patient and strategic, and in the end, he succeeded.
It just shows you the power of staying level-headed even when things are crazy.
Totally. Wheeler also talks about jazz improvisation.
Jazz improvisation, what does that have to do with negotiation?
Well, think about it. Jazz is all about listening,
Okay.
adapting and responding to what your fellow musicians are playing.
Okay.
Negotiation is kind of the same way.
Oh, I see. You're constantly reading the room and adjusting how you approach things.
Exactly. You're not just sticking to some script.
Right. It's about being flexible and creative.
Yeah. Like a jazz musician riffing off their bandmates.
I like that. So are you saying that getting a little uncomfortable in a negotiation might actually help?
Oh, absolutely. Think about Miles Davis, the trumpet player.
Okay.
He was always pushing his band members to improvise, even if they weren't comfortable with it.
Right.
But that discomfort, that's what led to some of the most innovative music ever.
Wow. So sometimes we got to push ourselves outside our comfort zone to find those truly creative solutions.
Absolutely. One of the best examples of this is Chris Hughes, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army.
Okay.
He was in Iraq facing this really tense situation with a crowd gathering outside a mosque.
Oh, wow.
Instead of doing what you might expect, escalating things, he told his troops to kneel.
To kneel? What? Why?
Yeah. It was this incredible gesture of respect.
Oh, wow.
And it totally diffused the tension.
That's amazing.
It's a total improvisation, deviating from the usual playbook, but it worked.
It really highlights the power of thinking outside the box.
Exactly. And
So-
being adaptable.
Now, this brings up the ethics of negotiation.
Okay.
How do we make sure we're being strategic but not dishonest? Like Wheeler gives this example of a homeowner who discovers an environmental problem right before selling their house.
Yeah.
What do? Do they disclose it? Even if it could mean the deal falls through.
That's a tough one. Wheeler argues that you should never straight up lie,
Right.
but knowing how and when to reveal information, that's a key skill.
So it's about being strategic.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, but it's crucial for long-term success.
I see. So it's not about hiding the truth, but using it in a way that builds trust.
Right. He tells this story about this guy, Norman, who kept getting these holiday hams from a contractor.
Holiday hams.
Yeah. Seemed harmless at first, but then it started influencing his decisions.
Oh, I see.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Even small compromises can add up and start affecting your ethics.
That's a good point. Sometimes we might try to justify those little compromises without realizing the impact they're having on us.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about being aware of those subtle influences.
Right. And staying true to our values.
Totally. Now, we've all been in negotiations, some good, some not so good, but how do we actually learn from them?
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what went right or wrong. There are so many factors.
Exactly. But Wheeler has these 3 principles for reflecting on your negotiations.
Okay, I like this.
The first one is beware of misattribution.
Okay.
It's tempting to take all the credit when things go well
Right.
and blame outside forces when they don't.
Yeah, I've definitely done that.
But you got to be honest with yourself and separate luck from skill.
So being objective.
Right. What's the second principle?
I don't know, you tell me.
Okay, it's don't confuse satisfaction with success.
Oh, that's good.
Just because you felt good about a deal doesn't mean it was the absolute best you could have gotten.
So don't settle for good enough.
Exactly. Always push yourself to do better.
Love it. What's the third one?
This one's important. Remember, it's not just about you.
Okay.
You got to analyze the negotiation from the other side's perspective, too.
That's interesting.
What were their motivations? Their constraints? How did what you did affect their decisions?
So it's about understanding the whole picture.
Yeah. Wheeler actually suggests keeping a negotiation journal.
A journal.
Yeah. To track your experiences and then go back and analyze them.
That's actually a really good idea.
By writing down the details, you can start to see patterns in your behavior.
Oh, yeah, like what are my strengths and weaknesses?
Exactly. And then you can use that to improve.
So it's kind of like that map that guided those lost soldiers.
Yeah. These principles can help guide us through the complex world of negotiation.
It's all about preparation, adaptability, and being okay with things not always going according to plan.
You got it.
What really stands out to you about how Daniel Yin was able to get his brother back?
I mean, his ability to stay calm and think strategically, even in that crazy situation, was amazing.
Yeah.
It really shows the power of that presence of spirit.
We'll dive deeper into the world of negotiation in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've got a lot more to uncover.
But for now, keep these insights from Michael Wheeler in mind as you navigate your own negotiations.
They might just be the map you need to succeed.
Exactly.
One thing that really struck me about Daniel Yin's story was how he was able to, connect with the kidnapper.
Right. It's amazing that even in that situation, he was able to build some kind of rapport.
I know, it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
He even shared personal stories about his family and his hopes for his brother.
Yeah, it was risky, but it seemed to humanize the situation.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even in those tough situations, there's always that human element.
Yeah, you got to remember that.
Understanding the other side's motivations, their fears, even their ego can really make a difference.
It's like finding that common ground even when it seems impossible.
Yeah, totally. Wheeler also talks about mastering the art of saying no productively.
Saying no, but isn't the goal to get to yes?
Yeah, and it's not about shutting down the conversation.
Okay,
It's more like turning that no into a yes, but.
I see.
So every time you say no, you're also offering an alternative.
Okay, so you keep the conversation going.
Exactly. And that way you can explore different possibilities.
That makes sense. He gives that example of the real estate developer and the historical preservation group.
Oh, yeah. Talk about two sides with totally different goals.
Right, so how did they ever come to an agreement?
Well, they shifted their focus from their positions to their interests.
What do you mean?
The developer realized that the preservationists weren't just being difficult.
Okay.
They genuinely cared about protecting the community's history.
And I bet the preservationists realized that the developer wasn't some evil corporation.
Right. They wanted to create jobs and revitalize the area.
So they both had good intentions.
Exactly. And once they acknowledged each other's concerns, they were able to get creative.
Oh, yeah. How so?
They incorporated some of the historical elements into the new development.
Oh, wow. So they preserved the history while still allowing the project to move forward.
A win-win.
I love it. It shows that saying no strategically can actually lead to better outcomes for everyone.
Absolutely. It's about collaboration, not just confrontation.
Now let's talk about situational awareness.
Okay?
It's about being tuned in to what's going on around you, reading between the lines.
Right. It's like having your finger on the pulse of the negotiation.
Yeah. Wheeler uses this military strategy called the ODO loop.
Odo loop.
Yeah. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act.
Interesting.
So it's about making decisions in those fast-changing environments.
Yeah. You're constantly assessing the situation, figuring out where you stand, making a decision, taking action, and then repeating the process.
So you're always adapting.
Exactly. Think about Chesley Sullenberger.
The pilot who landed that plane on the Hudson River.
Yep. He was facing a crazy situation. Both engines failed right after takeoff.
Oh, wow. Talk about pressure.
I know, right? But he stayed calm, observed what was happening, weighed his options, and made that split-second decision to land in the river.
And he saved everyone on board.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It just shows you that even when things go wrong, you can still turn things around if you stay focused.
You got to think clearly and act decisively.
Absolutely. But, it's not always about acting. Sometimes the best thing to do is walk away.
So when do you know when to call it quits?
Well, Wheeler gives some good advice on that.
Like what?
If the other side is being totally unreasonable,
Okay.
or if you're Behan A, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement is better than anything they're offering.
So you have to know what your options are.
Yeah, and you shouldn't settle for less than you deserve.
It's about knowing your worth.
Right. He tells this story about Richard, this young entrepreneur who spent weeks prepping for a big negotiation.
Okay.
He was so ready to close this deal.
What happened?
Well, during the negotiation, he realized the client's expectations were just way too high.
Oh, no.
They wanted all these concessions that would have really hurt his company.
So what did he do?
He walked away.
Wow. That must have been a tough decision.
It was, but it was the right one.
Yeah, no deal is better than a bad deal.
Totally. Sometimes the hardest part of negotiation is knowing when to say no.
And that no can be powerful.
It shows you're not willing to compromise your principles.
Now let's talk about closing the deal.
Okay.
Wheeler says it's not just about getting to yes, it's how you get there.
Yeah, the way you close can really affect the relationship going forward.
So it's about more than just the agreement itself.
Right. You want to be clear and concise.
Okay.
Summarize everything, make sure both sides are on the same page.
And avoid those pressure tactics.
Exactly. No ultimatums or artificial deadlines.
You want to build trust, not resentment.
Right. Wheeler tells this story about a real estate developer who was super aggressive in his negotiations.
I bet people hated negotiating with him.
They did. He had this reputation for always pushing for the best deal for himself.
So what happened?
Well, he ended up isolating himself.
Oh, no.
Nobody wanted to work with him.
Because they knew he'd always put his own interests first.
Exactly. So, those aggressive tactics, they might work in the short term, but they can really hurt you in the long run.
It's a good reminder that relationships matter.
They do. Wheeler also says you should be gracious even when you win.
Oh, that's interesting.
Even if you totally outmaneuver the other side, acknowledge their efforts
Okay.
and thank them for working with you.
So it's about being respectful.
Exactly. Negotiation doesn't have to be this cutthroat battle.
Right. It's not about making the other person feel like a loser.
Totally. There's this great story about Herb Cohen, this legendary negotiator.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
So he once got this amazing deal on a refrigerator,
Okay.
but instead of bragging about it, he thanked the salesman for helping him out.
Wow. That's classy.
Right. It's a small gesture, but it goes a long way.
Yeah, it shows that you value the relationship.
Absolutely. Another important point Wheeler makes is to avoid making assumptions about the other person's intentions.
It's easy to think that they're trying to take advantage of you.
Right. But that's not always the case.
Our own biases can get in the way.
Exactly. Like he gives this example of these two companies that were rivals for years.
Oh, wow.
Their CEOs were known for being really tough negotiators.
Okay.
But when they finally sat down to talk about a potential partnership, something interesting happened.
What happened? Did they finally become friends?
Well, not quite, but they did find some common ground.
Oh, yeah.
They realized that working together would actually be better for both of them.
So sometimes even your biggest rivals can become allies.
Exactly. It's all about keeping an open mind.
Right. Don't let your assumptions prevent you from exploring new opportunities.
Now let's talk about the psychology of negotiation.
Oh, this is interesting.
Our emotions, biases, perceptions, they all played a role.
So it's about being self-aware.
Exactly. Wheeler tells this story about a negotiation that totally went south.
Oh, no. What happened?
One of the guys let his anger get the better of him.
Oh, no.
He was so focused on winning that he lost sight of everything else.
And I'm guessing it backfired?
Oh, yeah. He ruined the deal and damaged the relationship.
Ouch. So how do you manage your emotions in a negotiation?
Well, it's about being aware of them.
Okay.
You want to use positive emotions like enthusiasm and optimism to your advantage,
Right.
but you got to keep those negative ones like anger and frustration in check.
That makes sense.
Wheeler also talks about cognitive biases.
Cognitive biases.
Yeah, like anchoring bias and confirmation bias.
Refresh my memory. What are those again?
So anchoring bias is our tendency to fixate on the first piece of information we hear,
Okay.
even if it's not accurate.
Right. And confirmation bias is when we only look for information that supports what we already believe.
Exactly. And these biases can really mess with your negotiations.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like imagine being stuck on an unrealistic opening offer
Right.
or ignoring information that doesn't fit your narrative.
You could miss out on some great opportunities.
Exactly. So it's important to be open to new information, challenge your assumptions, and get different perspectives.
Good advice. What else?
Oh, he also talks about framing effects.
Framing effects.
Yeah, it's about how the way you present information can influence people's decisions.
Oh, interesting.
He's this example of two parties framing the same proposal in totally different ways.
Oh, yeah.
One focused on potential losses, the other focused on potential gains.
I bet the one focused on losses was a lot harder to negotiate with.
You got it. Even though the terms were the same, the way it was presented made all the difference.
So it's about being mindful of how you communicate.
Exactly. Choose your words carefully.
Now let's talk about preparation.
Okay.
Wheeler is a big believer in doing your homework.
Oh, yeah. You got to research the other side, understand their interests and their limits.
And come up with a plan.
Exactly. He recommends thinking through different scenarios,
Okay.
anticipating potential roadblocks and having backup plans.
So you're ready for anything.
Yeah. It's like having a roadmap, even if you have to take a detour sometimes.
Like that analogy. But what about when things get tough?
Well, Wheeler says patience, persistence, and resilience are key.
Yeah, negotiations rarely go perfectly smoothly.
Totally. There can be setbacks, delays, unexpected challenges.
So how do you stay positive?
Well, he tells this story about a negotiator who spent months trying to land this huge contract.
Okay.
He faced rejection after rejection, but he never gave up.
Wow, that's dedication.
He was persistent, kept refining his strategy, building relationships, and showing his commitment.
So it eventually paid off.
It did. He got the contract and built a strong partnership.
That's awesome. It shows that even the toughest goals are achievable if you don't give up.
Exactly. Now let's dive into the ethics of negotiation.
Okay.
This is where things can get kind of tricky,
Yeah, you gotta balance honesty and strategy.
right? Wheeler talks about the difference between passive and active misrepresentation.
Okay.
Passive misrepresentation is like withholding information,
Okay.
and active misrepresentation is actually making false statements.
So one is worse than the other.
Right. Wheeler says you should always be transparent about your intentions.
Oh,
Avoid making promises you can't keep, and be willing to walk away if a deal compromises your ethics.
it's about doing business the right way.
Totally.
Yeah.
He tells this story about a negotiator who was tempted to lie about his company's financials to get a better deal.
Oh, wow. That's a tough situation.
It was, but he chose to be honest even though it meant risking the deal.
And what happened?
Well, surprisingly, his honesty actually helped him.
Really?
The other party respected him for it, and they worked together to reach an agreement.
Wow. So honesty really is the best policy.
It is. It builds trust, strengthens your reputation, and leads to better relationships in the long run.
Now, what about negotiating in different cultures?
That's a whole other challenge.
Right.
Wheeler says it's crucial to be aware of cultural differences.
Okay.
You got to understand how people communicate what their values are, what their expectations are.
So do your research.
Exactly. And be prepared to adapt your approach.
He gives that example of a negotiation that failed because someone misinterpreted the other person's communication style.
Oh, yeah. They thought the other person was being aggressive when they were just being direct.
So those cultural nuances can really make a difference.
They can. And building relationships is even more important in those cross-cultural situations.
I see.
Find common ground, emphasize shared interests, and show that you're genuinely interested in understanding their perspective.
So it's about building bridges.
Exactly. He tells this story about a negotiator who successfully navigated a cultural divide by being empathetic and adaptable.
What did he do?
Well, he learned about the other person's culture.
Okay.
He showed respect for their traditions and communicated in a way that was sensitive to their culture.
That's all.
And it worked. They built a strong rapport and reached a mutually beneficial agreement.
It shows that cultural sensitivity combined with good negotiation skills can overcome any obstacle.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have. It's been a whirlwind of insights and stories.
What are some of the key takeaways that stand out to you?
Well, I really like the idea of presence of spirit.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept.
It's about finding that balance between calmness and attentiveness, patience and proactiveness, practicality and creativity,
It's about having the right mindset.
and being adaptable.
Yeah, whether it's navigating the ZOPA or dealing with the unexpected flexibility is key.
And of course, you can't forget about ethics.
Right. Honesty, integrity, fairness. Those are the foundation of any successful negotiation.
They build trust, and that's what leads to lasting relationships.
Totally. What about you? What stood out to you about how that real estate developer and those preservationists found that win-win solution?
I think it was their willingness to look beyond their differences and focus on their shared interests.
Yeah, that's so important.
By understanding each other's motivations, they were able to come up with a solution that worked for everyone.
It's a great reminder that collaboration can lead to amazing results.
We'll wrap up our deep dive in the next part with some final thoughts from Wheeler and some tips for putting all of this into practice.
Yeah, we'll give you some tools to take your negotiations to the next level.
But for now, let all of this sink in. Think about how you can apply these ideas to your own life.
Are you ready to embrace the chaos and make it your friend?
Okay, so we've talked about mindset, we've talked about strategy ethics, even cross-cultural negotiation.
Wheeler's book really covers it all.
It does. But you know, one thing that stuck with me is this idea of learning from experience.
Oh, yeah. It's so easy to just get caught up in the heat of the moment.
Totally. But if we want to improve, we got to take the time to reflect.
Right. Think about what worked, what didn't.
Wheeler suggests keeping a negotiation journal.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Just jot down some notes after each negotiation.
Like, what strategies did you use? What were the outcomes? What did you learn?
It's like having your own personal coach,
I like that.
helping you analyze your performance and get better.
He also talks about getting feedback from other people.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Talk to colleagues, mentors, friends who've seen you negotiate.
They can offer a fresh perspective.
Totally. They might notice things you don't even realize,
It's all about being open to feedback.
even if it's not always easy to hear.
Right. The more feedback we get, the more self-aware we become.
And that helps us become better negotiators.
Wheeler also says we should learn from the best.
Oh, yeah. Study the masters.
People who are great negotiators in different fields.
Business, politics, diplomacy, sports.
Analyze their techniques.
It's like having this whole library of negotiation wisdom at your fingertips.
You can learn so much from observing others.
And don't forget, negotiation is an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's a journey.
There's no magic formula.
You're always learning and growing.
Stay curious.
Challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone.
Always be looking for new ways to create value and build relationships.
So as you head into your next negotiation, remember what we've talked about today.
Embrace the complexity.
Master your mindset.
Never stop learning.
Wheeler says, make chaos your friend.
It's a great reminder that in negotiation, things are always changing.
But with the right tools and the right attitude.
You can handle anything.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the world of negotiation.
We hope you enjoyed exploring Michael Wheeler's A Arte da Negociación with us.
It's a fascinating book full of practical insight.
Remember, negotiation is a skill anyone can learn.
It just takes practice.
So get out there, embrace the challenge,
And start negotiating like a pro.